Okay, so this is gonna be my little short Raw review. Even when I say short, some kind of way the video gets to be like 20 minutes long. I'm gonna try not to do that. But first, what we're gonna talk about, I already got a video up about Jey Uso versus Seth. That's a pretty long video, so I'm not gonna get too much into that on this topic because that I dedicated a longer video to that one. So first, Paul Heyman confronted Jey Uso. Paul Heyman confronted Jey Uso, basically just conning him into accepting a challenge versus Seth Rollins tonight. And I could go. I'm not gonna go into it further what Paul Heyman was saying, but Paul Heyman really didn't give too much of an explanation about why he chose Seth. He just kind of said Punk put him in a predicament where he had to side with Seth because he would be betraying Roman. So that's kind of what Paul Heyman said. Next, you had Penta versus JD. 3 out of 5 star match. It wasn't too awesome. It wasn't too boring. It was just a great match from Penta and JD. And I think, we were happy to see JD back in action. Then you had Sheamus versus Austin Theory. Honestly, this match wasn't too bad, but I mean, this is the problem with WWE. They have the same 25 wrestlers on the show all the time. Why did Austin Theory have to put over Sheamus? Does Sheamus not trust anyone else in WWE to fight with? I mean, you have so many wrestlers you could utilize, and you could have thrown them to Sheamus. It did not have to be Austin Theory, who beat John Cena, I think, at WrestleMania. I don't understand it, but this was a good match. Sheamus definitely looks like he has maybe one more year, or this is last year, because once Sheamus hit that, what is it called, the clover leaf or something, man, he looked like he was about to have a heart attack, and I really was worried for Sheamus. But man, y'all have so many wrestlers. This could have been anybody but Austin Theory. Then Becky Lynch and Lyra. I think the right decision would be to let Lyra win. Lyra kind of showed us that, hey, I'm not going to be pushed around by Becky. That she deserves to be champion, blah, blah, blah. I don't care for Lyra too much, but, I want to see her succeed. Becky isn't giving, something's off. I don't know what it is, but it's, she's not giving this, oh, I'm so dominant. She's saying everyone else is trash and garbage, but, she's almost giving off like she's a little kid bully type. Becky came off more annoying than anything. And I think that's where it's going. When Lyra beat her up, we was kind of like, thank you. Thank you, because we don't want to hear Becky talk. That's kind of what it is. Next, you had Io Sky versus Roxanne Perez. This was definitely one of those 4 out of 5-star matches. You know, for what Jey Uso and Seth did, this would just be the women's version. And man, Io Sky is one of the top wrestlers that are signed to WWE. You know, you have, just in the women's division, you know, you have Bianca Belair, you know, you have Rhea, you have Charlotte Flair, you know, you have Liv, you have these great women wrestlers, but when you're talking about actual, factual, you know, putting in that work, you know, Io Sky is, you know, probably number one or two. Storyline wise, when you put Bianca up against anybody, you know, just, I don't know, Bianca's almost like Goku. You know, I have to win, or I could beat this person, but you know, I don't look at Bianca as, I want to say, like, you know, not this technical, fast pace, you know, Bianca, Rhea, even Charlotte, you know, those women wrestlers still, you can tell they're looking for their spot. Not as a botch type, you know, thing, but Bianca would look to be like, okay, I have to catch Io, and I'm looking to catch her, you know, 3 to 5 seconds before she jumps, and I'm not necessarily selling that move that just happened. Roxanne Perez and Io had such great chemistry that this match actually looked like a Chris Benoit versus Kurt Angle, or, you know, a Chris Jericho versus a Chris Benoit, where it's just that chemistry that they had. And, you know, I forgot about Asuka too. Asuka is one of those that have that great in-ring ability. And I think that's why this match was so good. You know, you had a segment where, you know, Roxanne Perez did a suicide dive from the bottom rope, and then instantly recovered through Io in the ring, and like turned around to do like a taunt or something, and then Io comes back with the suicide dive from the second rope. And I mean, it looked good. And even the finish, you know, we didn't even get the over the moonsault, but I'm glad this finish was the way it was, because, you know, it wasn't a million kick outs after every, like, you hit your finishing move 5 times and this person's still kicking out. Well, you know, this was who can do the best roll-up pin. You know, they just gave us like 10 ways you can hit a pin. And, you know, Io winning off of that pin showed like, hey, I'm the better technical wrestler than you. And honestly, I thought at the end of the match, you know, yeah, they shook each other's hand, and, you know, that was fine. But then they brought back the story mode with Julia, and, you know, they whooped Io. You would not get this kind of match out of really... There's probably only about a handful, I'm going to say 10 on the WWE roster right now that could pull a match like that off. And, you know, I don't want to go too deep in it, but just to sort of give a, I don't know, like an example, we're not getting a match like this out of Tiffany and Jade, and they're on the main roster. You know, we won't get you can get this out of maybe a Bianca and Liv. Bianca and Liv, you might not get the super technical, but they can choreograph a match to where it's like, okay, we could hit these spots without it looking too weird. But this actual in-ring work, that's a art. When you make it look like an art, you're only gonna get that from pretty much every Japanese wrestler. They know how to do it. I mean, even if you look at Tozawa. Okay, y'all, I had a phone call come through. So now we back picking up off of the Io Sky Roxanne Perez match. Like I said, it was a good match. You know, the women's division, they have some great women wrestlers, and I think Roxanne Perez, you know, she proved let me see. She basically proved that she could go toe to toe in a not in a world heavyweight championship match, but blow for blow with the world's women champion. And you know, I think this secured her on WWE probably another 5 years. This match proved it. People could vouch for her. And trust me, Julia is going to get her shine probably with a match with Rhea. That's probably going to solidify her, you know, to come to the main roster. Because Julia is one of those wrestlers who isn't just, you know, I'm in the WWE and the storyline is proving that I'm the best. Like, no, she put in that work. But Io Sky versus Roxanne Perez, that was a great match. You know, going off of Rusev versus Otis, this was just a squash match for Rusev. And it is weird that, you know, Otis is probably being booked into oblivion. Otis doesn't, you know, he's probably signed a contract to be a jobber, just like Tozawa is being a jobber. But Tozawa, going off topic, Tozawa is one of those wrestlers who's a great wrestler, but you gave him that gimmick and it's killing him. Tozawa should be given the correct gimmick. Tozawa should be facing people definitely in the mid card. You know, just so we talking wrestling skill, Tozawa is, you know, on par or better than people like Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens. You know, you got people like Kevin Owens on the main roster, you know, but, you know, Kevin Owens can't, I'm not going to sit up here and say he can't wrestle. He does some cool moves, but, bruh, Kevin Owens just, we talking about worldwide wrestling. Like, there's people in CMLL, AAA, you know, a million times better than Kevin Owens. But he's on the main roster and Tozawa is a jobber. Okay. Then you have Gunther versus Pat McAfee. They didn't fight, but they had their little run-in. There's a rumor going around that Goldberg is going to save Pat McAfee. That better happen. Because if that doesn't happen, and Pat McAfee starts to fight back at Gunther, is going to destroy Gunther's career. If Pat McAfee has to get anything off in their match, Gunther better put his hands behind his back and let Pat McAfee hit him, and don't let it phase him. Because if Pat McAfee does any type of reversal, any type of one-up on Gunther, it's going to kill his career. And it also not necessarily impacts his opponents that he previously had. But didn't Gunther beat Randy Orton? You think Pat McAfee could come up against Randy Orton? It's like Gunther beat Randy Orton. And now he lost to Jey Uso. And now he's fighting Pat McAfee. The only thing that can save Gunther right now is if Goldberg came out, hit him with the spear, and maybe we get a Goldberg versus Gunther at like Crown Jewel or something. And let that be Goldberg's last match. And, you know, Gunther beating or not beating Goldberg, even if Gunther took a squash match from Goldberg and that match lasted 3 minutes, losing to Goldberg isn't a career-ending loss. It honestly boosts you up a little bit just to say, hey, I fought one of the greats. And I entertained the fans. Goldberg can take some chops from Gunther. Goldberg might even could take a power bomb from Gunther. But I don't know who could come in there and save Pat McAfee. Honestly, Bronson Reed. But Bronson Reed is a heel. So, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. But you cannot let Pat McAfee fight Gunther. And last, you know, Seth Rollins versus Jey Uso. I have a video on that. Not going into too much depth. But like I say, 4 out of 5 stars. For a Raw match, it might be a 5 out of 5. The trash, garbage Raws that we've been getting, this might be a 5 out of 5 match for Raw. But just overall, we want to see more. Last, I didn't see this, but supposedly when Raw went off, Logan Paul attacked Jey Uso. After seeing Seth versus Jey Uso, we don't want to see Logan Paul versus Jey Uso. But, you know, I never had a problem too much with Logan Paul. But, and I'm going to say Logan Paul as a wrestler. I think Logan Paul may be one of those kids that grew up watching wrestling and life took them, you know, most people that's watching wrestling don't go out and try to be a wrestler, but I think Logan Paul liked wrestling. He became famous, got a chance to be a wrestler, but he wasn't one of those celebrities that's just like, I'm not going to take this serious. Logan Paul, if he could stay with the part-time schedule, Logan Paul might actually decide to stay in wrestling another 5 years. You know, he might stay till 2030 or something. And he already has buku money. So, you know, he isn't wrestling for, you know, $1 million or, you know, I don't know what his contract is, but I don't think Logan Paul is just doing this for the money. I think he's doing it because he genuinely likes wrestling. And if he could get some cool stuff off and add some highlights not only to his wrestling career, but just to his overall brand and, you know, life. I think that's what Logan Paul is doing it for. But that was Raw. You know, he attacked Jey Uso. So they're gonna pivot from this Seth versus Jey thing for a while. And I honestly have high hopes for a Logan Paul and Jey Uso match. Honestly, I'm not gonna say I can't wait to see it, but it's intriguing to see what they might pull off. So I'm gonna end it with that. This was part 2. So I'm gonna try to have this video ready to go tonight. And we're just gonna wait on SmackDown and see what our final Backlash card gonna be. Peace.